We have more work to do in the coming years, and I'm so glad to see so many people here to mark this moment and the many moments to come. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you very, very much.
Why was that so important to you?
Because it's 2015.
A milestone moment. Canada's Prime Minister marches in Vancouver's Pride Parade. It's a first in this city's history that the head of government took part, wowing the crowds with his young family in tow.
This morning, the Supreme Court recognized that the Constitution guarantees marriage equality, that all people should be treated equally, regardless of who they are or who they love.
I have a few questions for you to consider. What do you do when laws are being made about you and your peers? Laws that will affect lives and futures. What do you do when those who will be affected are left out of the conversation? What do you do when it feels like everyone has stopped listening? These are the questions the youth were left to answer.
Scene 5, take 4.
One in a million is the only chance you got. That's what someone said to me. That's what someone thought. Well, I poured my blood, sweat, and tears into these last few years. And I'll be damned if I'll be told that I should live my life in fear. 'Cause even if one in a million's all I got, I can't be stopped.
I'm trying to just talk about this professionally as a broadcaster, but it blows my mind what we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
Essentially, if I may boil this down, we have a government right now that's trying to communicate to us that they're protecting the rights of school administrators to stop students from gathering in friendship clubs. And the concession that the government made yesterday, which is if a school board denies students the ability, the right, the facilities, the proper measures and procedure to gather together as a friendship club, as a gay-straight alliance, if they deny them that, then the government can step in and find an alternative location for these students. In other words, it's an okay message that gay and straight students are not allowed to gather in friendship on school grounds. We'll find you somewhere else, a dark little closet somewhere where you can gather and support each other.
We didn't agree with what Bill 10 was saying in that, in a sense, it made it a lot harder for kids to have a GSA, which in my personal opinion and quite a few others didn't seem fair. Because I mean, in our schools especially, we should have a right to be ourselves and to have other people around us who support us. I mean, you shouldn't have to go to school and not feel safe. So we came together as a group, mainly the 4 of us, but the whole council had a part of it. And we did a delegation in front of the city council, and we went to the school boards. We went around talking about what a GSA should look like, why it's important to have one, and general things you can do to make it better and safer for kids in our schools, which I think is important because We're in such a changing generation where now it's kind of split between older views and newer views, and how we have kids that are coming out or wanting to be more comfortable with their identity, and the youth around them support them, but a lot of the time the adults just not necessarily don't support them, but just don't know enough to be supportive.
This legislation supports the government's zero-tolerance attitude towards bullying, which is unacceptable. It is unacceptable whether it's related to sexual orientation, race, religion, or any other factor. With this legislation, students will have a clear recourse should their request to establish anti-discrimination clubs, including gay-straight alliances, be denied. With this legislation, Mr. Speaker, we are advancing the rights of the LGBTQ community, protecting children, and respecting the roles of parents and school boards. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I think there are probably a handful of times that I can count where experiences on council actually moved me to almost tears. And having the youth council show up at a meeting was one of those really powerful experiences. I really felt that it demonstrated that young people in our community are ready to be engaged and ready to take an active role in shaping not just Grande Prairie, but our province as a whole. And that kind of experience is something that I find deeply moving. When I see people who are demonstrating that they are empowered, is something that I take a lot of pride in as the mayor. In the end, I think my goal, and the goal of City Council is to ensure that our entire community feels empowered to shape their world, and especially our youth, given what a large population of youth we have in Grande Prairie.
Just
Morning. I think it's morning. Yeah, it is morning.
That was a long flight, hey?
Yep. Grande Prairie to Calgary, Calgary to Edmonton, and Edmonton to here.
Here, by show of hands, has a Twitter? Who here has a Twitter? Okay, so can you take out your Twitter right now and say, having a lovely day on Field Trip Day, hashtag GSA Forum 2016 at Canadian Heritage. So it's CDN Heritage at Justin Trudeau, okay? Because they're paying for it. They're paying for this, and we want to say thank you. What?
What if I don't have data?
If you don't have data, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Now you're thinking about doing it, but you don't have data, so don't do it. And at Justin Trudeau. Now some of you don't know the Justin, but he is our Prime Minister. Me and him are like this. Oh, well, okay. We're more like this.
Jeremy Dias is a huge inspiration and mentor. He was relentlessly bullied from junior high all through high school for being gay and a minority. After years of the school failing to intervene, Jeremy took the Algoma District School Board to the Ontario Human Rights Commission and was awarded Canada's second largest human rights settlement. With the money he was awarded, Jeremy started Jer's Vision, now known as the Canadian Centre for Gender and Sexual Diversity, an Ottawa-based organization focused on anti-bullying and anti-discrimination programming for youth.
Welcome to Field Trip Day! Yay! And I had a lovely conversation at the Grande Prairie Conference, and truly actually did an amazing presentation at the Grande Prairie Conference where they shared their experiences of coming out in their community, where they shared their experiences of advocating on LGBTQ issues in their community, and it was truly powerful because what truly is doing, really powerful, so funny, but what truly is doing is actually really groundbreaking because it's the first time people are having those conversations. So please join me in giving a round of applause for Truly.
Yay, Truly.
Basically, I had a really tough time in high school. Like, really tough time. Like, I got beat up, I'd go to the hospital, I lied to my mom about where I was, and I hated high school. And, you know, it was little things, but it was like a series of 1,000 paper cuts, right? One cut does not kill you, but 1,000 over a series of time just eats away at your soul. And what really bothered me about the whole experience, right, was like how closeted I had to be about it. I'll give you an example. One day I got up early to take my dog for a walk, and someone had spray painted faggot on the side of our house. And like, the last thing I wanted to do was wake up my parents and wake up my brother and be like, someone spray painted faggot on the side of our house. Why, Mom? Oh, well, I'm gay. You know, like, it just, I didn't even want to go there. And so I remember, cleaning it off, before anyone woke up. And, my dog just sitting as a witness to this whole, like, I don't know, like, assault on, like, the one space in this whole town that, I considered safe. And it was a series of events like that just sort of, like, really drove me to a breaking point.
Through the CCGSD forums, I've met so many amazing people. One of these people being Max. Besides being a good friend, Max has taught me a lot about what life is like for transgender people in Canada. It was because of Max and his story that I became inspired to take part in the fight towards equality.
Some of the challenges I have faced as a member of the LGBTQ community include a lot of misunderstandings between people that perhaps do not know better, as well as a lot of misunderstandings between people that definitely know better, or at least should. Also, sad to say, quite a bit of violence. Yeah, take the moment. I'm extremely lucky that the largest scar I have is only that long. It's a burn. It could have been a lot worse. I know people where it has been a lot worse. I have a friend that has a scar running down her face from there, and then it comes down like that. Because of some ignorant asshole that just couldn't understand her.
So this is working. I only have a few moments to talk because I'm in a hotel room right now in Edmonton, and I just got off the plane from the conference in Toronto, and I'm really sad. And I just wanted to grab a few moments with the camera that Kara gave me just to catch, I guess, the feeling of the conference being over, the fact that it's like done. It's weird. It's weird and it hurts and it sucks. I know that seems weird to say for something that only lasts 5 days. The connections you make there. I mean, such an amazing place. The staff is so amazing. I don't even feel like staff anymore. They're like my family. And I'm gonna miss everybody. I learned a lot. I did. I mean, every time you go, you think you know everything, but you don't. I met a lot of new amazing people. A lot of people with their own problems running their GSA, own things they want to learn. And I mean, just this collective, even without the workshops, just meeting everybody, you learn so much. And you learn so much about different people and different stories. And it's incredible. I think it's important that we have things like this because, we don't get to come together very often. I mean, like, allies in the LGBTQ community, they don't always intersect on a massive scale. It's a lot of the time in smaller communities or smaller areas. And, sometimes you forget that you have people that care about you all the way across the country. And I think that's why Jeremy's work is so important, is to remind us that we're not alone. And I miss everybody at the conference so much. I miss everybody. It's going to be a lot of tears for the next few days. But yeah, all right. One more night and I'm home in the GP.
Only a year after Bill 10, and a few weeks after returning from the Canadian Centre for Gender and Sexual Diversity Forum, I realized our fight at home was far from over. Our Facebook feeds were now being flooded with a new kind of anger over our province's new but not widely approved gender guidelines.
The following is a presentation of Tomorrow's World.
Guidelines for best practices, creating learning environments that respect diverse sexual orientation, gender identities, and gender expressions. The guidelines, which were published online, required all private, public, charter, Catholic, and alternative schools to meet their standards by March 2016. No discussion, just do it or else. As part of the guidelines, all schools from kindergarten through grade 12 are, get this, not allowed to inform parents about their child's gender expression. According to these policies, they are intended to protect lesbian, gay, bisexual, two-spirit, queer, questioning, and trans.
Alberta, Canada is focusing on more equality for their transgender residents, and they're doing so by ensuring that people can use the bathroom of the gender that they identify with. Now, of course, there are some religious individuals that don't agree with this decision, and one of those people is a mother who's very concerned. She goes by MH Weeb, and she is an aspiring rapper. So she put out a rap video talking about this issue, and you will love it. Let's take a look.
Are there 6, perhaps 13 in essence, children in Alberta who switch gender pretense? No, this is not the issue to legislate or to pursue. This is just a fender bender all over sex and gender. Can we pick another issue than to change our bathrooms for a few? In this way, seize the day. Seize the day.
Seize the day. Hey, Chris. What did I just watch? Okay, let's do this.
Now let's see, it's the 21st century.
Come on, what's the fuss? Have a seat, let's discuss. It's about more than just bathrooms and sports. Tolerance and respect, it affects all of us.
Now let's see, it's the 21st century.
Gay marriage is legal, and that don't bother me. Homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, an easy scapegoat for the scared and angry. It's about these kids who can't be forced to hide their true identity. It's time to unite and take a stand and rid our schools of this bigotry. Now understand this, I have 3 kids too, a set of twin girls and a son. Woo-hoo! However they choose to identify, I got their backs, because that's what I do.
The guidelines sparked instant controversy across Alberta, both sides with the intention to protect the province's children. Some of the key points of the guideline came under great scrutiny, such as accessible washrooms and change rooms for LGBTQ students, the right to confidentiality regarding sexual orientation and gender identity, the minimization of gender-segregated activities, and respecting students' and staff's pronouns and prefixes. However, despite all of this, one thing remained the same. The stats tell a story of violence and discrimination LGBTQ people, especially youth, still face today.
So the stat is 56% of youth who come out to their parents have a negative reaction. 23 to 28% of that, of those reactions are physical violence. And so there is not just the emotional issue around the rejection, but half of the youth who come out to their parents can expect to experience a physical violence. And so you don't know which parent that's going to be. You just don't know. And so for protection of all youth, I think that that's really important, that the teachers aren't allowed to talk or tell the parents.
I think it's the child's own identity, and it has nothing to do with their parent. And I don't think that's safe for the child especially if they haven't came out to the parent yet, or if they're in an unsafe environment where their parent won't be accepting of that, because 40% of LGBTQ youth are homeless, and that just goes to show that there is a lot of unacceptance within the home. So they need that support at school with or without parental consent. The child is still going to be LGBTQ whether they have consent from their parent or not. They will always feel that way and they will always identify that way, maybe just not openly, which just makes them feel uncomfortable and like they have to hide something.
Well, I feel that gender guidelines are important because we want to all feel included, right? Especially at our age, a lot of kids want to feel included. And it doesn't always mean, you know, I want to go hang out with this group, I want to do that, I want to do this. No, it's just, we want to be ourselves. With teachers, what's nice is that if a kid is scared to tell their parents, and it's understandable sometimes, because imagine growing up with someone your whole life and then having to tell them something that is very difficult, at least for some families. When you're able to open up to teachers and you know you have that confidentiality, or you open the staff at schools, staff at different places, and they're a supportive environment, and they can, you know that it's safe with them, they can't tell anyone. It makes you feel like there's a weight off your chest, right? And it's so much simpler. And when it comes to gender neutral washrooms, I know people that they want to go use that washroom because that's what they are, right? Why do you think we have stereotypical male and female signs on washrooms? We're not interested in what's going on. Just use the washroom, honestly. Who is ever interested in what happens in that washroom and opposing for you to go in a certain washroom? Why? It's weird. And you feel put down, right? You feel like, oh man, they're saying I'm gonna be this, I'm gonna be that, I'm gonna be a bad person. Talk to me for 10 minutes.
85% of the parents in our area were against the guidelines. And I just sat there thinking, I'm like, okay, but my mom doesn't go to school with me every day. My mom doesn't pee in the same bathrooms that I do. She's not there. And I'm like, who interviewed the kids? Like, why are we not being asked about issues that directly affect us? And it was an automatic flashback to Bill 10, where they completely changed the bill based on what the parents and the government were saying. But nobody talked to the kids. Nobody asked the kids. And these are our lives. These are our peers. And I think that if we're going to bring in all parties of concern, that we should definitely have a voice. And that's why I think it's so important that we fight for this, because I want to make sure that everybody in this side of the story is heard, especially youth, because we so often don't get the chance. A lot of people in our community really want to be supportive, but I feel so often it's not that they don't want to, they just don't know how.
I think that the guidelines that this government has introduced are important because they create the framework for discussions, really tough discussions to be had. And quite frankly, a lot of the schools actually had very similar guidelines already, and it was just trying to create the basis for everybody to start from. Those, especially those that didn't have any kind of framework. But like everything else, these are, I think, meant to be organic in the sense that they need to be revisited. It's not a solution that is going to create a permanent change forevermore, and we don't ever have to revisit them, and we never have to talk about them. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is create the environment in which a student comes to school and finds themselves in a safe environment to just be who they are, so they can actually concentrate on learning, which is really what they're there for.
We didn't change really anything, how we were dealing with it. We just put it into wording, and there's a little bit of fine tuning. And I think that was the big surprise to a lot of the parents, is that, you know, we already have this. We have in our system, we have 8,000 kids. We probably have 2 or 3 kids that are transgender right now, and they coexist. And for the most part, the kids don't care or know. Well, they know, but they don't care.
Gender identity, gender expression is where a lot of that fear comes in, where a lot of that resistance is right now. Not that, you know, problems with sexuality are done or that we can put them away. But there's definitely more resistance around gender theory. And I think that's just it. People aren't familiar with it, and it's very new, and they don't think that they have to understand it, and they don't understand. We have to give people space to learn. We're not expecting you to come in and be perfect, but we're expecting you to approach this with an attitude of open-mindedness, an attitude of learning. And we expect you to give space to people who do understand and who understand because they have these lived experiences.
Historically, one of the things that the LGBTQ community has faced is this perception from some people that these are lifestyle choices. I mean, I think we've all sort of heard that this is something that somebody chooses. And it's very challenging for somebody who is just off the street, let's say, to understand the difference between gender and sexuality and gender expression, like, if they've never been exposed to it. And so I think if we're really an inclusive community that cares about one another, we'll demonstrate that by allowing the space and providing the opportunities for others to educate themselves so that they can increase their understanding, so that they can then be more open and inclusive to others.
Advice for parents that are fearing the change that is happening is difficult for me to give because I don't always understand where they're coming from. But I suppose the important message to take home is that people are people. And no matter who they are, no matter their expression or their identity, what's it matter to you? If somebody is going to express themselves in a way that you are not familiar with, become more familiar with it. Learn about it. Because that's a person, that's a human that you interact with. That's an important connection to have.
You need to trust your children. You need to trust your children to know what they're going through and to know what they need to do about it. Because the only expert on your child is not you, it's them. They know what they're doing. They know what they're going through more than you ever could. And I'm not saying you don't know your children. I'm saying that they know themselves. And trust your children, and it will turn out for better or for worse. Trust your children to do what they need to do in order to make themselves the best they can be.
Throughout history, the LGBTQ community has had to face violence and discrimination, including what we see today. We asked Elder Darlene Cardinal to educate us on the history of the LGBTQ community, and more specifically, two-spirited people in pre-colonized Indigenous society.
The Aboriginal community, or the Indigenous, welcome the youth who confesses or is transgender, homosexual, lesbian, and they are considered two-spirited and they are gifted. To have one in your family or to have one in your community is very well accepted. And to us, it's having the wealth. But when the Europeans came in, that was cast out. They said it was wrong, it was a sin and everything. So they had to hide. They had to, in fact, they were killed. And the twin spirit is they can relate to both. And but there's still one person. And for me, I have the one spirit, Darlene, my spirit. But for them, they have the two. So one is male and one is female, but there's still one person.
It has taken our society a long time to once again try to celebrate the LGBTQ community. change happens at different paces across the country. In Grande Prairie, progressive ideas often face a slow process of acceptance. Yet, in June of 2016, our once labeled Redneck city held its first ever Pride event.
Room, everyone's paying a lot of attention, and I was scared sitting down at that table going, how am I going to be able to do a proclamation here when I'm the biggest downer of the show? And then I saw what I had to compete with, and I thought, okay, forget it. But I do actually have the great honor of making this proclamation for Pride Day, so if you'll bear with me for the official part of the program. Today, people of all sexual orientations and gender identities can share this Grande Prairie Pride event. Here we are, all together, celebrating our humanity in all its diversity. While we celebrate and discover our diversity, this event will inevitably, and more importantly, teach us what we have in common. This event demonstrates that for all the differences in sexuality and gender, what really connects us as neighbors, co-workers, and friends is that we have simple human needs. We need to feel valued. We need to feel accepted. We need to feel loved.
So the question was what my experience of participation in Pride was like, and for me it was very moving in a couple different levels. First off, the idea that people in Grande Prairie, that might not have had an opportunity to express themselves freely, obviously felt safe, was really moving to me, because as a straight person, as a white male straight person, I don't face those feelings of insecurity and safety, and I don't experience them the same way as many other people in my community do. And for me to see that there are people who are obviously being underserved means that there is this gap where we haven't been doing our job. So for me, Pride was a great experience because it demonstrated that we can make meaningful steps to ensure that people feel safe in our community. And that was an excellent example of that. Sorry for getting emotional about that. But it was very powerful for me because, in my opinion, the Pride events that we held in Grande Prairie were really a truly uniquely Grande Prairie expression of pride and inclusiveness. The idea that the festival was a family event and a family affair specifically targeted for families and young children, I think was really meaningful. And I think that was a true expression of how pride and LGBTQ issues can be addressed in our community, and how that might be different than how they're expressed in other communities.
You know, it's incredibly important for youth to have a voice, especially in the LGBTQ community, because so many of these decisions are being made for youth without their input. And sometimes you get caught up in this very nebulous world of legislation that doesn't connect back to the issue that you're really trying to address. And by that I mean, not trying to create problems and then solving them and thinking that you've actually done something when in fact you never continue to have that discussion and continue to have that conversation and that dialogue.
The premise of the question about how older generations can be more inclusive when they make decisions on behalf of youth, I think is a bit of a mistake. I think what we have to do is find more ways to include youth in making the decisions. If we say that we need to only get more input from youth, that's good and that's a positive step. But saying that we just want to hear from youth is not the same as saying we want to involve youth in actually making the decision. I think that everything that we do at the city needs to be built on a basis of actually engaging youth to the extent possible in making the decisions on issues that affect them.
My generation's a very open generation, to say the least. We are able to speak our minds a lot more than we could. If we look back 20 years ago, if I was standing here right now doing the same thing, would my opinion matter to a lot of adults? Probably not. But it's great the opportunities that we can have now. So I think our generation, to describe it, is very open and accepting and very inclusive and progressive generation. You will not believe the mindset that some of these kids have at the age of 14. I've seen some great kids doing amazing things with their lives. It's awesome.
My journey started 2 years ago when I learned what it felt like not to have a voice. This documentary is not just about the LGBTQ community, but something even bigger. It's about how we as a society value our youth and their voices. We are tired of being the generation of tomorrow when we are alive today. We do not have all the answers, but that should not deprive us of our seat at the table. When youth voices are ignored, it is a great injustice on our future. One of my favorite quotes is by Desmond Tutu. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. So let me ask you this. What will you do to help end the oppression? What will you do to help youth voices be heard?
'Cause this strangely familiar dream is real to me. Well, life takes all kinds. Well, some of us draw lines in the sand, and on either side we stand. But we've got to wake up.